Welcome back to Braveheart Talks, and we are in the second part of our series, She Is Me. And in today's episode of She Is Me, we're going to be looking at a snippet of the life of a young woman who is briefly mentioned in the Bible, and yet the little we do know about her can teach us an awful lot. I don't know how you were raised or what influences you had around you. I don't know if you had good role models or no role models, whether you had sisters or no sisters, a good mother or an absent mother. We were all raised differently. But the truth is, how we were raised in our most formative years does have an impact on the woman we become. For some of you, you'll be able to look back on your childhood and reflect on the women who influenced you the most. Maybe it was your mother, or maybe it was a grandmother or a sister or an aunt or somebody who helped you transition from a little girl into a little lady. You were taught things like manners, how to hold your cutlery correctly at the dinner table, and you were reminded to eat with your mouth closed, and someone taught you to cross your legs when you sit down with a skirt on, although we do know now that is not good for varicose veins. But those of you who have daughters yourself, you will know just how early on young girls take an interest on becoming young women. And a lot of young girls, they want to become like their mum. You know, I have a 2-year-old granddaughter who wants to rummage through my makeup bag and try on my shoes, and it just entertains me when I watch her. From a very young age, girls want to wear jewelry and explore makeup and dress like a princess. I can remember as a child having a dressing up box that was primarily just old net curtains. But I loved making wedding dresses out of that box and those old curtains. I would put them on, I would drape them over my head and around my shoulders. Then I would walk up and down my bedroom as though it was the aisle of a church, imagining what my wedding day would one day be like. There would have been someone in your world, a mother or a teacher or a sister, who helped you navigate the changes in your body between the ages of 12 to 14, when your hormones and your monthly cycle all became active. The feelings, the tears, the struggle, it's real when you're no longer a girl, but you're not quite a woman. But hopefully you had someone to look up to, someone to listen to you, someone to help you navigate the ever-changing seasons of your life. But sadly, not everyone has a someone to lean on and to look up to. There may be some girls or some women listening today, and you're reflecting back on your childhood, on your days of adolescence, and maybe it was not a pleasant experience. Maybe your mother was physically absent, or maybe she was there but disengaged or disinterested in you, and you never knew what it was to be helped and loved through the different stages of your life. Maybe you were left to learn and figure stuff out on your own. Well, if that was you, you're in good company, because this is the story of our girl today. Her name is Dinah, and her story can be found in Genesis 34. Dinah was the daughter of Leah and Jacob, and you'll probably be familiar with Leah. She was the sister of Rachel. Do you remember the two sisters, and they were both married to Jacob? Well, the scripture tells us that Jacob loved Rachel, but he was actually tricked into marrying Leah. It also tells us that Rachel was beautiful, and it more or less insinuates that Leah was not. So we're already building up a picture of Dinah's mother, Leah. It's as though she seems to always play second fiddle to her sister. For her whole life, she was not as pretty as her sister, and then she was not as loved like her sister was loved. Leah was not loved by her husband Jacob, but she served a purpose to him. Leah was extremely fertile and was able to produce many sons for Jacob, but he was not in love with her, and she knew it. And this was the root of Leah's rejection. Leah spent her whole adult life trying to win the affection of her husband. She bore Jacob 6 sons, and each one she named significantly, trying to win the affection of her husband. Each son's name had a significant meaning. She would name them with names that meant things like, now my husband will look at me, or now my husband will love me. But after her 6th son, Leah gives birth to a daughter, and she names her daughter Dinah. Just Dinah. No prophecy, no significant meaning, no hopes, no dreams, no ambition for this child, just a girl. Unimportant, unassuming, Dinah. She could have almost called her Dinah the Disappointment. She is hardly even mentioned in the story of Leah and Jacob, as though she entered the world by mistake, insignificantly and under the radar of family importance. But although we don't know too much about Dinah, the details that we have about her mother's life helps us form a picture of what life must have been like for Dinah. There are a few things that we could assume, like Dinah grew up in a household full of boys. She must have felt quite isolated at times. She was probably at the brunt of many of their jokes. There wasn't anyone she could talk to when she was trying to figure out her own femininity or monthly cycles or her mood swings. Her mother was present, but not really there because she had all her own issues going on. She was still busy clinging on to the fragments of her own marriage and still trying to win the affection of her own husband. So the only glimpse that we get into this young girl's world is really a sad piece of text in Genesis 34. It tells us that Dinah went out to visit the women of Shechem. Now, Shechem was the town that Dinah's family had settled on the outskirts of. And from what we know in this text, somewhere during that visit to Shechem to find some girlfriends, she was raped by a man of prominence in the city. I find this story so saddening because Dinah went out in search for something that she should have found at home. She went looking for a place of belonging, and she went in search of acceptance. She went looking for her fit. She went looking for people who she could relate to. It's quite likely that she always felt the odd one out in her family, and her mother, instead of putting time and influence into her daughter, remained focused on her own struggles. Instead of putting value and worth in telling her daughter she was uniquely and beautifully made by God, she was still battling her own insecurities. Instead of speaking affirmation and encouragement over Dinah, she was still seeking affirmation for herself. I don't know how this story resonates with you. Maybe you didn't have the privilege of feeling like home was a safe place or a place where you were valued and shown your worth when you were growing up. You too may have experienced rejection early on in life. It's sad because we don't get to pick and choose our parents and the families that we're born into. And there are many mothers raising daughters who are still trying to figure out their own identity and worth. But as I read this story, I felt awakened and reminded to never overlook the daughters, the sisters, and the girlfriends that God has placed in your world today. They may not be your blood relatives, but when I think of the girls that wander through our church doors and through the doors of Braveheart, I am reminded that we have a choice. We can either compete and compare and tear one another down, or we can embrace each other, celebrate each other's uniqueness, build up and encourage one another, and learn lessons from the mothers in the house about what it is to be daughters of the King. If we fail to esteem and encourage one another, then we will find young women wandering away from the house of God to seek affirmation in the world. And the world will trick you, and the world will deceive you and take advantage of your worth, just like it did with Dinah. So my prayer has been and will continue to be that the house of God and the environment of Braveheart will be a home that is a safe place where daughters feel loved and valued, a place where they see their worth and discover their true identity and find out how uniquely and beautifully they are made, and that each one would know they do not have to seek recognition and affirmation from the world. If I could speak to Dinah today, I would apologize and say on behalf of womanhood, I am sorry that you went through what you went through, but I am so grateful that your life became a lesson so that we don't have to go through the experiences that broke you. I don't know if the story of Dinah resonates with you today, but I want to encourage you, stop looking back at what broke you and let's begin to move forward, because the way that we are rebuilt and the way that we are strengthened is when we invest into others. So I want to encourage you to take a look at who is around you and see where you can encourage and build and edify someone else. Thank you for tuning in and listening today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Braveheart Talks. Please like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. And don't forget, Braveheart Conference 2026. It's only a short time away, so you can head over to the link in our bio and secure your tickets today. Until next time.